Hi, it's Linda. Well, in this video, we're going to explore how to design powerful learning experiences using the backwards design model. Let's look at how you can take the curriculum from your course commons and turn it into powerful learning experiences for your students using a design approach called backwards design. I love this quote from Stephen Covey. It's so simple, yet so true. I remember when I first started teaching, my planning process started with the textbook. I spent hours creating PowerPoint slides that covered all the material in the chapter. I really didn't think much about how I was going to evaluate if students learned anything. I guess I just figured that would happen on the midterm or the final exam. Also, back then we had what were called KSA statements, so that's knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So I wasn't really sure what the end game looked like. As my teaching learning practice developed, it was simple models like this backwards design model that really helped me take my design skills to the next level. The backwards design model comes from a book called Understanding by Design, which was written by Grant Wiggins and Jay McTeague. The basic premise is that we need to start the learning design process with the learning outcomes. And, of course, in the BBA, we also have to consider those undergraduate competencies. Once that's clear, what the assessment and evaluation tools we're going to use have to be considered, and only then do you start to decide how to facilitate the learning process. The first step is identifying the desired performance, and this is done through the writing of learning outcomes. Basically, the learning outcomes are the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that students need to demonstrate in order to successfully complete their learning. We also need to take into consideration those undergraduate competencies, or in the diploma we call them essential employability skills. But what competencies do they need to demonstrate in order to be successful in completing their learning? You'll find the course level learning outcomes on the course outline. And you may also find more specific lesson level learning outcomes in the course common. In addition to the learning outcomes, you'll want to identify those undergraduate competencies or the essential employability skills that will be developed in your course. For diploma courses, you'll find these on the course outline. In graduate certificates and in the degree, these are not currently recorded on the course outline. However, if you're unsure which of the employability skills or undergraduate competencies that should be developed in the course, have a chat with the course designer. The second step is to determine how you'll collect evidence that the students are learning what the course requires them to learn. Now we're going to talk a lot more about assessment and evaluation of learning in week 4, but this slide just gives a quick overview. So I think of formative assessment as being those sort of in-process activities that help me to pinpoint the learning hits and misses. When the assessment indicates that there's a block in learning, it allows me to review material and provide additional activities to help my students get past that block. It might be a reflective piece like a 1-minute paper, or I could be using clickers in the classroom. I might use a stop, start, continue. All of these different strategies will help me to check on the learning process. Also, there's the formal evaluations that lead to a final grade in the course that help me to measure student understanding. Whether it's a written test, a case study report, a research report, or a presentation, all of these tools help me to measure student learning. Step 3 is about getting to the learning experience. Wait a minute, that used to be my starting point. I looked at the textbook, and then I started building my PowerPoint slides. Well, although the lecture is a very efficient way to transmit information, it's not always the most effective way. Have you ever noticed your students nodding off or texting their buddies during your favorite PowerPoint slides? So there are so many different ways that we can facilitate learning in the classroom. from collaborative learning activities to simulations to clickers to videos to lectures. There's tons and tons of choices. Let's use an example from the Business Foundations course to illustrate the backwards design model. The learning outcome we'll use for this example is on the slide. Now, you'll see in here we're asking students to be able to evaluate, and evaluation requires higher level thinking. So we need to design this carefully so the students will be able to look at specific situations and not only see the impact of the culture on continuous improvement, but also evaluate the implications of this on culture. Now, the final proof that the students have achieved this learning outcome comes in the form of a written case study. And when I checked it out, it looks like it's worth 10% of their final grade. Of course, I found all of this information on the course outline in the comments. So when I'm thinking about it, if they have to hand in a case study, doesn't it make sense that they're doing case studies in class? Well, to prepare them to understand the concepts and frameworks, they first need to be introduced to them. And since we're working in this flipped classroom, the introduction to the content will happen as part of the pre-work. And when I checked Slate, I found that there was a quiz that would evaluate their level of understanding of the pre-work. I also found that there's a couple of reading assignments and a great video for them to watch. And all this was already prepared for me by the course lead. Great. The next key design consideration is the bridge between the pre-work and the in-class exercise. When I reviewed the results of the quiz on the pre-work, I noticed the students were struggling with one of the key concepts. So I'm going to use this information to create my bridging activity. This will allow us to review the concept and ensure students are able to apply it in the main learning activity. But there's some key questions that students will have to be able to answer in the case study that they hand in. So I've developed a list of discussion questions using the textbook, the final case study, and my own personal experience in this area. So when I ask these questions in class, it will help me to measure the level of student understanding of the material. So here's another assessment opportunity. So it just makes sense to have them doing a mini case study, and we'll debrief it in class. They'll be able to apply their knowledge in a collaborative manner, and we'll see where the dots are connecting and where they're not, so that we can, and also it'll help them understand the level of detail they need to get into in their case study assignment that they're handing in. Sounds like a great design. Oh, wait a minute. I totally forgot the undergrad competencies. And how am I going to build that into the learning experience? Well, I talked to the course lead, and he said that the development of business writing skills is one of the undergrad competencies that needs to be developed in this course. And this is a great opportunity, so let's use the backwards design process to do this too. So, I know there's that quiz at the end of the pre-work that's checking the level of student comprehension of content. So why don't I just expand the quiz to include some questions about business writing skills? Maybe I'll get them to rewrite some statements into more of a business format. So I'm going to add a reading and a worksheet to the pre-work that will introduce some basic business writing skills. I want to take some time to provide students with feedback on their business writing skills, so I'll start planning this when I look at the results of the quiz. Some areas of confusion might be identified, and I'll use that data to create a bridge so that we can move into some more work on this area. It's always easier to mark a well-written case study than one that's poorly written, so I want to provide them with some feedback about their writing. So if we're doing a mini case study, maybe I'm going to have each student prepare a written answer to one of the questions. Then we can use the peer feedback process guided by a business writing checklist so the students can give each other some help with their writing. So here's a quick checklist to see if your design works. First and foremost, are we preparing the students to successfully demonstrate the learning outcomes and undergraduate competencies? Are we measuring comprehension of content and ability to perform the undergraduate competencies? And are we including activities that introduce the content and activities to build those graduate competencies?